I'm going to turn off the camera. Please don't forget to send us the interpretation button.
Okay.
Thank you, Dama.
I just want to confirm that the interpreters have been spotlighted, the ASL interpreters.
You have the ability to spotlight yourself as a co-host. Thank you.
This is the Spanish interpreter testing. Estoy
Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome everyone who is here with us today, joining us on this evening. I will go ahead and get us started. We have our second of 3 kind of fall provider information sessions, so we really appreciate you taking the time to join us here today. We will go ahead and before we get started with the material, make sure that folks who are joining us and need interpretation for Russian and Spanish are able to access it. And we have turned on that feature. You should see a little globe at the bottom of your screen. We have the picture in the next slide here to show it. Can we do next slide, please? Thank you. All right, so si usted habla español, puede presionar el icono que está en la parte de abajo de su pantalla para seleccionar el idioma en español. Lo puedes encontrar en la pantalla en el lado de abajo a la derecha. And I think we have our Russian interpreter set up as well. So great. Sounds like they're on. So we'll go ahead and move on over. Thank you, everyone. Here's a quick overview of our agenda for the evening. We'll start off with checking in on COVID-19 resources and current policies, understanding that we are still under a pandemic and just want to make sure that we are sharing available and ongoing resources with you all. We'll also review childcare stabilization grant application process and resources. We had a great conversation last month, lots of great questions, and just wanted to circle back and share where we are and allow for follow-up questions or clarity on our end. And lastly, we will be learning about the Oregon Department of Human Services employment-related daycare, which we oftentimes refer to as ERDC, regarding eligibility, co-pay structure, and policy updates. So we're glad to have a few folks from DHS here today to share some information and answer your questions. And we'll go ahead and share each topic, followed by a question and answer option, and then continue that way. We have the question and answer feature on Zoom. Please go ahead and use that feature for your questions. We will have a moderator asking those questions to our panelists. And if you are listening and tuning in on Facebook, we also have Early Learning Division staff monitoring those comments to make sure that we are bringing those questions forward as well. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that we are observing questions, and we'll do our best to address as many as we possibly can within the hour that we have this evening. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Miriam. And if you all can please introduce yourself before you start speaking, just so that all of our listeners get a sense of who we are. And I realize I didn't do that myself. So my name is Karina Guzman Ortiz, and I'm Partner Engagement Specialist. A pleasure to be here with you all. And I'll hand it over to Miriam. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. My name is Miriam Cecilia, and I'm a regional manager with the Office of Child Care. I'll just do a quick check-in on COVID. Fortunately, we have no substantial updates for this month. I think we're all probably relieved to hear that. I can share screen and show you some of our, and Karina, do you want to move slides for me? And I am unable to share my screen, but if somebody wanted to pull up a screen, I could share, or you can give it over to me.
I believe it.
I'll just go
slide.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just point you to our website here, COVID-19 for providers. You can find our What's New Childcare Updates button to subscribe for updates. Here are our current COVID-19 requirements and recommendations. Information on provider sessions. Here's a button to order PPE supplies, masks, gloves, and disinfectant wipes and baby wipes. Some information about child care providers boosters. This is also where you'll find more information when children have the availability 5 through 12, ages 5 through 12 will have the availability to become vaccinated. Also, we'll put information up here. And then down below, you can find under guidance and resources for child care providers, some different resources that we still have available. Daily health checks, daily attendance logs, the exclusion diagram, and various other things. So I'll stop sharing, or you can take it back. I'm not sure how to. There we go. And you can put the screen, the slides back up. But I think that's about it for updates. We still have our OHSU nurse hotline for providers if you have questions about an exposure or needing to close or quarantine a classroom. And also we'll be resuming in-person licensing visits starting in November. So for a while now, all of our licensing visits have been done virtually, and we're able to go back out in the field starting in November. So we'll be looking forward to seeing you in person.
Thank you, Miriam. And wondering, we have Allison and Ronnie on. Do we have any questions related to COVID that we want to bring forth?
We don't have any questions on Facebook right now, Karina.
We do have one question that is sort of COVID related for Miriam. Miriam, can you address the possible teacher qualification exceptions and when will those be approved?
Well, this is kind of a bigger conversation that I probably want to get into the weeds on tonight, but I would suggest that you reach out to your licensing specialist if you have questions about that possibility. I think they'll be able to help you in depth.
Thank you. And that was it on my end.
Thank you, Miriam, for sharing this today. We will go ahead with that and transition over to an update on child care stabilization grants. Thank you, Dawn, for being here with us again today.
Yeah, hello, everybody. My name's Dawn Taylor, and I'm the Director of Organizational Development with the Early Learning Division, and I'm leading the work on the Child Care Stabilization grants. Wanted to start off by providing just an update of kind of what we've received thus far. So on this chart, you can see that as of October 13th, 58% of registered family and certified family have applied for the grants and 74% of certified family. And you can see the total numbers here. We've received as of October 13th, 2,221 total applications. And you can see that it's from a variety of, from registered family, certified center, and ODHS license exempt programs. This next slide shows, again, as of October 13th, that if you look at the total, 91% of all applications that are received have been approved. We have about 8% that are still in review, and less than 0.5% are not being approved. So I'm sure many of you have received your approval emails. I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the timeline. I know we've gotten a lot of questions in our inbox and for this webinar, and want to acknowledge that this is definitely taking a lot longer than past grants, and can definitely recognize how frustrating that is for people. I know that I'm sometimes frustrated trying to get these out the door. And so we did have to adjust the process for the stabilization grants, which is what is making it take longer. So I think in past grants, you were sent an approval email, we issued you the grant agreement, and then there was kind of, it depended on if you were set up in the vendor system, if you, in terms of the time to get your payment. This time we're needing to do some additional processes, and that is making it take longer. So I want to recognize that. I can assure you that we are working very hard to get this out to you as quickly as possible. Wanted to again remind everybody of the contact information, ELD stabilization page. I'm actually going to click and go there in a minute and show you some new resources that we've put on there. The phone number for our ECC grants, the email address, and then you can also contact your local childcare resource and referral if you need help filling it out, or maybe want some support in terms of record keeping. And they also have an extended helpline grant session. So let me take a moment and I'm going to click us over into the ELD Childcare Stabilization website. And we've added some new resources. I know that we received a lot of questions around kind of what can I use this funding for? can I buy this? Can I purchase this? And those are not questions that we can directly answer. You really need to read your the grant agreement, the funding opportunity, and see how those pieces fit in. But we do have a guide here that was developed by Children's First Finance at the Federal Office of Child Care created. And so these are a great resource. They're specific to the stabilization grants for a family child care budget guide. There's a child care center budget guide, as well as we have updated our FAQs. You will see that there is new. So as we receive a lot of questions, of the same topic, we are continuing to add new FAQs, and hopefully indicating there will help you see when there's new information available. We've also been able, I also want to direct you that within the W-9 guide, if you're unsure how to complete the W-9, there's actually within that guide, there is a link to a tutorial that the IRS has put together. And so that could be helpful to you as well. We also have a recent webinar kind of about the stabilization, and we invite you to click and watch it there in terms of thinking about the record keeping and allowable expenses. So hopefully those resources can also help provide some clarity. I also know that AFSCME for family childcare providers have offered some trainings as well, and that could be there as a resource. So with that, Allison, is there anything you want to add, or are we ready for questions?
I think we're ready for questions, Dawn. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Dawn, there's a couple questions around the chart that shows the eligibility guidelines, that really colorful chart. And in relation to programs that have OPK, early Head Start sites, they are mixed delivery. They have community-based children, they have these slots. So when they came across answering it in the application, they were a little confused and had to stop. And they were saying that the eligibility part doesn't show that, so.
Yeah, no, thank you for that feedback. Yeah, the flow chart, and we have an FAQ on it, so that if you are a program who maybe has a contract to provide services to a few children from Head Start or Early Head Start, preschool promise, or not preschool promise, apologies, relief nurseries, you are still eligible to apply for these grants. It's only like the fully funded Head Start, Early Head Start, Oregon Pre-K that are not eligible, but a mixed delivery is eligible.
Thank you. Will there be enough funds for those that decide to apply later, like in November and December? Will there still be funds available for them? Absolutely.
We were sure to budget so that everyone who is eligible that applies by December 31st of 2021 will receive funding. There is no risk of the funds running out.
Thank you. Allison, did you have anything coming in from Facebook?
Sorry, Ronnie. Refreshing to make sure. Just one question asking, when can we expect the Docusign? Dawn, maybe if you can pull up that timeline again.
Yes.
Be helpful for folks.
Yeah. So again, this is taking, longer than people have experienced. My hope is that in sometime in the first half of November, we'll be able to get grant agreements out the door. We're having to check additional things, or some additional processes that are having to take place with these grants. So, the second week of November, is that in that kind of that first half is what we're really hoping for. But at this point, I can't give an exact timeline.
Okay, thank you. Dawn, could you also talk about the option number 2 on the email that says they were approved? And the option number 2 was stating that if their W-9 was correct and up to date, what should they do?
Yeah, great question. If you have no changes in a W-9 that you've submitted to us for past grants, there's nothing that you need to do. As soon as we are able to send you out your grant agreement in Docusign, that's your next step, is to sign that, review and sign that grant agreement. If, as we're going through all of our processes and we see that there's an issue with your W-9 that maybe you thought it was good, we will reach out to you directly. So if you believe your W-9 is good to go, just wait for that Docusign to come your way.
Thank you. Can the funds from the stabilization grant be used to pay past unemployment bills that they still owe?
So the grant funds can be used, from it says within personnel, wages, there's a grant area. So you need to look within that and see if that fits within those categories. So that you can anticipate and be able to document how it fits within whatever category you're thinking that it fits.
Thank you. So Dawn, can you just review a little bit more about the additional processes for the grants after they get the approval? What can they expect to happen?
Well, I mean, it's really internal processes. So it's once we get through and doing all of our checks in terms of, we have to look in some different federal databases. We need to look within some state databases to make sure that things are matching. Once that is done, then they receive the Docusign, and those are still the processes that we're working through. As you can see, with over 2,000 applications, it's taking considerable time to work through those additional processes. So once we're done getting those pieces finalized and completed, then you will receive your Docusign.
Thank you. Allison, do you have questions coming in from Facebook?
We do. Thank you, Ronnie. We have a question asking, will checks come in one check or several?
So there are 2 payments for this grant opportunity. So once we have an executed agreement, you'll receive the first half of your award amount. And then about 3 months later, you'll receive the second half.
Yeah, another one here. Dawn, what should someone do if they did not get an approval email?
Oh, please reach out and email our grants inbox. If you haven't received an approved and it's been a while since you submitted, and our grants team can go in and look. We still have a few that are, in review, have some mismatch. Some of you maybe have gotten emails from us when maybe there was a typo in a license number, or something like that. So please reach out to eccgrants@state.or.us. And please do give us a few days to get back to you. We have a large volume in our inbox, and so we are working diligently at it. But it can maybe take us 2 to 3 days to get back to you.
Thank you. So how do they report on the spending that they're doing for the grant?
Yeah, there is no reporting requirements for this grant opportunity that you need to submit to the Early Learning Division. The record keeping that you need to maintain is in the event that you were audited, you'd be able to show what you use those funds for and how it fit within the criteria of the grant.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through. If someone gets the monies gets the check in 2021, will there be a difference if they hold the deposit of it until 2022?
I am not a tax advisor to know how that would work. You'd have to check with a tax advisor to see how that would impact any taxes.
Okay, thank you. And what is the timeline to use the money once you get the money?
Yeah, great question. So the grants are from January 30 of 2020 until 6 months after you have an executed agreement. So let's say November 15th, your grant agreement is executed. The date you will see on there would be November, December, January, February, March, would be like April 30th of 2022.
Okay, thank you. Allison?
No others at the moment, Ronnie. I'll keep refreshing.
Okay, thank you. Submit a budget. Let me see. There's some of them that are just multiple. Do you have examples of compensation increases that qualify for the 20% increase?
So the language is very wide open to how a provider would, may want to increase compensation. I've heard providers talk about, giving their staff bonuses, giving some stipends, possibly, paying for health insurance that's been out of pocket for them. So I think there's lots of ways in which to look at how, what would work best for your business in terms of increasing compensation.
Thank you. Dawn, how long do they need to keep records of how they spent the funds?
Great. In Oregon, it is 6 years that you'll need to keep records.
Thank you. Okay, Allison, our Facebook friends have anything?
Not yet, Ronnie. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this is taxable income, is that correct?
Correct. Well, it depends on your tax situation. It has not been made exempt from taxes through Congress.
Okay, thank you. There were several questions about that. Can you talk a little bit about the payment process? How many payments, how far apart?
Yeah, so there'll be 2 payments and they'll be 3 months apart.
Okay, thank you. What happens if you close after you get the stabilization grant?
Then you would be asked to return, most likely be asked to return a prorated amount of funds.
Okay, thank you. So when you start to pay them, do you do the payment by batches? And does it go in order of who applied first and who got approved first? How does that work?
Yeah, it'll be done in batches. The first batch will be very large. It really is not based on necessarily when people applied. I mean, there's going to be, I think, naturally a little bit of that, but it's really going to be who's set up in the vendor system. So if we've received a W-9 and maybe we've had a back and forth and having a hard time getting things to match up with the tax records, someone who applied after that person could receive their grant payment prior. So it really depends on, once we get all our checks and balances taken care of, that first batch will be whomever we were able to get everything done on.
And so Dawn, this is a question in relation to the 20% for staff. If you're the sole provider, can you pay yourself with that 20%?
Yeah, if you're the only staff, then that you would need to receive a 20% increase.
Allison, don't want to leave our Facebook friends out.
Thank you. There's a question very similar to yours, Ronnie, asking on the application, it says we can use 20% for payroll. It doesn't say at least or just, can we use more than 20% for payroll or use all of the grant towards staff?
Yeah, no, you must, it's just, you must use at least 20% to increase compensation for your staff. You could do 80%. It's just at least 20%.
Thank you. So if providers have received the reopening grant, do they also qualify or could they also qualify for the stabilization grant?
Yeah, if you receive a reopening grant, that does not make you not qualified for the stabilization grant. Each eligibility is independent of each of the grants.
Okay, this isn't a question, it's a comment. Said I'd like to extend a compliment of gratitude to all of I have exchanged with through this process. You've all been amazing. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So there's a clarifying questions that we have a few of them around the 20%. Is it a 20% increase in compensation or is it 20% of the total grant funds that need to be used towards that? If you can clarify that, we have a few questions around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the grant funds themselves in the application, you're going to pick how you think you're going to spend the funds. The 20% is that of all the grant funds that you received. So just for simple math, let's say you received $100. At least $20 would need to go to increase staff compensation. Excuse me, I have to take a drink. So it's not that the 20% of the funds need to be used to pay for your personnel. It's that the staff themselves need to receive 20% of the funds need to be used to increase their compensation.
Thank you, Dawn. And for our last question for right now, so we can go on to the other parts of our agenda, is could you tell the audience how they can find out how much they should or could expect to receive from their grants?
Yeah, absolutely. We've actually been working on a calculator to get up there, but we figured getting the processes done to get your grant agreements out was a higher priority. So what you can do is look at the funding opportunity and look at what type of provider you are. So, if you're let's say that you're a certified family provider, so you'd look at that dollar amount. And then if you marked in your bonuses, if you mark that you care for infants and toddlers, you're then going to take of that kind of base amount based on your provider type. You're going to add 30% to your award amount. If you care for children receiving subsidies, you'd add 10% extra. So you can use those percentages to estimate your award amount.
Okay, thank you, Karina. We're at 6:30.
Thank you so much, Dawn, for answering all of those questions and for everyone who has been asking those questions via the Facebook chat feature and the Facebook comment feature and the Zoom Q&A. I know we did not get to all of them, but we will do our best to follow up after this webinar to some of those questions if we have your contact information, which if you registered, we have that. If you are asking questions anonymously on here, then it'll be a little bit more difficult, but our goal is to address as many questions as possible. And with that, we'll go ahead and hand it over to our staff members from ODHS who are here to share about the employment-related daycare. So thank you so much for being with us. Please go ahead and introduce yourselves. We will hear some updates regarding ERDC. And again, after their presentation, we will go back to answering questions. So please go ahead and share your questions as you hear some of this information. Thanks again. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Eras. I work for the Department of Human Services with the Child Care Program. And we do have one other staff member here tonight, so I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi there, my name is Joseph Litkey, and I work with the Prepayment specifically, and I get to partner with policy, and I'm the child care provider specialist.
Okay, and so today I just wanted to share some high-level information about the employment-related daycare program. It's also known as the ERDC program. Basically, this is a child care subsidy program, which means that the state helps pay for a portion of the family's child care. And the families do have a copay that they would pay directly to the providers themselves. Employment-related daycare, as it says in the name, is primarily for working parents, but we also can cover some school hours, depending on the type of schooling and how much the parent is working. There is a link on here if you're interested in seeing a little bit of information about the rates that ODHS pays. So we do have specific rates for different child care provider types in different areas. And we will also share a little bit of information about the copay and what that is and how the copays have changed. So during COVID, our families have not had any copays. Actually, all of the cases have had a $0 copay assigned to them since March of 2020, and that just recently changed October 1st. And so we will share a little bit more information about what that new copay structure looks like and what that means for providers. And another piece about the employment-related daycare program is that we can also help to cover any registration or mandatory fees that a family may need to pay in order to get their child enrolled into a child care slot. And so those are typically paid through the local branch offices. The parent does need to make a request to have the registration fee paid. And there's a little bit of a different process for paying those fees as the process for paying the monthly child care payments. And if you want to advance to the next slide. So for receiving payment from the state, providers do need to go through what we call a listing process with the Oregon Department of Human Services. The process looks a little bit different depending on if you're a licensed provider versus if you're a license exempt provider. We do pay both licensed and license exempt providers, but basically providers need to meet all of the ODHS requirements that are actually listed out on the child care provider listing form, which is the form that you would have to submit in order to get your information into our system. All providers do need to have a background check completed, but if you're a licensed provider and you're on the central background registry, we accept that background check and we don't do an additional check. But for license exempt providers, ODHS does have a background check process that we go through. Also for license exempt providers, there's a provider orientation that you would need to take within 90 days of becoming a listed provider. So there's a little bit of time in order to get that. Those are provided through the Child Care Resource and Referrals. But then for all providers, you are required to meet training requirements. Many of the requirements that we have do line up with licensing requirements. And so we don't really have additional training requirements on top of that for licensed providers. We have a link here to the child care provider listing form. Those are available online, but you can also get them from the families. If you have a family who is receiving employment-related daycare or other ODHS child care programs, because we also have the TANF Jobs program as well. There's not quite as many families on that program, but it's the same listing process and the billing forms look very similar between the two. We also have some links for the child care provider guide, and there is a lot of information available on our ODHS website regarding provider rates and requirements and trainings and different resources. So you can see that on this page as well. And as I mentioned before, the parents for the employment-related daycare program do have a copay. Basically, how the copays work is out of the DHS maximum rates that we can pay for childcare for a month, the copay is deducted from that payment. And so the copays are an agreement between the parent and the provider as far as when the parent pays that copay. One of the pieces that we feel is really significant about this change to the copay structure, as you can see, these are all the copay options that we've got for the household of 2 all the way up to a household of 5 or more. With this new structure, the maximum copay in the employment-related daycare program is $130 a month, which for those of you who have been working with the employment-related daycare program for years, you know that those copays they got extremely high in the past. For some of our larger families with higher income, I've seen copays that got really close to about $2,000 a month, which was really hard for families and for providers as well. I know a lot of providers don't necessarily collect the copay from families, and so we do feel like lowering the copays is definitely a benefit to providers as well. The new copay structure for any family who's under 100% of the federal poverty limit, it's actually still waived, and so you will be seeing continued zero copays from now and ongoing. And then as the family's income increases, the copay changes are a lot less steep than what they were previously. And this information has also been put online on the online copay calculator. So if you want to look at the copay structure or have information to that, then you can see that on our website. And another change that has happened fairly recently is we did make a change to our absent day policy, and this is a permanent change to the absent day policy. Prior to COVID, the absent days were limited, and we actually no longer have that limit on absent days. So we can cover any day that a child was scheduled to be in care but doesn't attend. The things that absent days can't cover are we can't cover if your child care provider site closes or you were otherwise unable to provide the care, or if a child's been absent and you were able to fill that slot with another child, you wouldn't be able to claim that as an absent day. We would ask that you just mark those days on your attendance logs as when the child should have been in and when they should have been out, and just make sure that they're marked as absent days on the billing forms. And also it's just one of the pieces is that if you typically charge absent days, you can charge ODHS absent days, but if that's not your current billing practice, we just expect the billing practices to stay the same between ODHS families and any private pay families that you may serve. And I believe that is, oh, we do have, I forgot about this slide. We do have a little bit more. So when I was talking about absent days, I did mention that it needs to be when a child is scheduled to be in care. And that could mean something different depending on the providers. I know there are some families who have very stable schedules, you know exactly when they're going to be there, basically year round, but also there are other families whose schedules change from week to week. And so if you had a day where that child was expected to be there, but they did not show up, that would be what we mean by scheduled to be in care. And then if a child has been gone from your care for a full calendar month, we can no longer pay for absent days beyond that point. We would consider that similar to abandonment of care if the child's been out for an extended period of time.
Jen, this is Ronnie. We do have a few questions coming in for you. Would it be okay if I ask those of you?
We can, yeah.
Okay, so there were a couple.
We have a few more slides, is that right?
Yeah, there's this, I believe this is our last slide.
Okay.
So I can go through the prepayment information as well. So this was a change that was actually effective August 1st for most provider types. Prior to August 1st, we only allowed prepayment for certified centers. But what prepayment does is it allows providers to submit their billing forms essentially as soon as you receive them for children who are scheduled to be in their care, and you have the
the information on when they're planning to be there. Basically, you would fill out the billing form with the anticipated hours of care for the month, what your charges are, and to go ahead and submit that at the very beginning of the month instead of having to wait until all of the care has been provided, which was how our policies worked in the past. We haven't been able to change the dates when those billing forms are mailed out. So billing forms for ODHS childcare programs are mailed out at the very end of the month. So for example, the November billing forms just went out in the mail. I want to say it was either yesterday or the day before. So it's usually about 4 business days before the end of the month is when they're sent out. So those are still being sent out at that time. Most providers should receive them either a little bit before the 1st of the month or right around the 1st of the month. And again, with the billing policies, we just ask that if it's your standard policy to bill all families, then you can go ahead and bill ODHS in that manner as well. Another pretty significant change is that the parent no longer has to sign the billing form. Sorry about that. But many providers do opt to still have that as part of their billing process, just to make sure that the families see the billing forms and that they agree to what the provider is submitting, but it's not a requirement on the payment side for us to have that parent signature. Okay, and I believe that was all we had on this slide. And these are some of the common questions that we get about the prepayment process. So if a child attends less hours than what you were anticipating or than what was scheduled, there's no, it doesn't cause an overpayment for the ERDC program. We don't expect you to pay the money back. That's fine because you billed for the hours the child was scheduled to be there, and those would just be considered absent days. And then also, if the child attends more hours than what you had planned with this, that would be through an adjustment process with the direct pay unit. So basically, you would just want to contact DPU and let them know that you need an adjustment made for that month. They'll send out documentation if you need to have a documentation sent, or otherwise they'll just request whatever information they need to be able to make those payment adjustments. And we do have an FAQ, a frequently asked question document that will be going online fairly soon regarding the absent day policies and how providers can use that. So one other announcement that we have for this coming year, I know that school has already started, and so this may seem a little bit late, but we do understand that there are still a lot of schools that are either doing hybrid learning or switching back and forth from in-person to distance learning. Previously, under the ERDC program, we couldn't pay for hours that a child was supposed to be attending school. If a child was homesick from school, we could pay for that, but if they were actually in class doing something like distance learning, we weren't able to cover it. But this is something that changed obviously with the pandemic, and then it's a decision that we decided to continue doing for this entire 2021 or 21-22 school year. So if you do have school-age children that are participating in distance learning, you are able to bill those hours for the employment-related daycare program. The only thing that we can't cover is if you're charging the parent for tutoring time, or if you're running something similar to a school site where you're charging parents for instruction or charging them as the child's teacher, that would be considered tuition, and we can't cover tuition costs with employment-related daycare, only the child care costs. And then we have some important phone numbers here. So to get through to our direct pay unit representatives, there's a phone line there. We also have an email address where you can submit questions or concerns that you may have. And then also we have a separate address where you can submit any billing forms, or if you're interested in becoming listed with with the direct pay unit and with the Oregon Department of Human Services, you can submit your listing form through that email address as well. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Now I will go ahead and hand it over to Ronnie. Sorry about that earlier, Ronnie. Thank you so much. If you want to go ahead and ask some questions, and then we'll also have Allison go ahead and address the questions coming in through Facebook. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. There were a couple questions around registration fees. So was there a cap on that? And what other information can you provide on that?
The registration fees do need to be verified. So that's something that when a parent requests the registration fees to be paid, many providers will have information like that on their website, which makes it really easy to verify on our side. But then also if you've given the parent a contract or something else that outlines what the registration fees are for, then we can use that as verification. Really, we do have our eligibility staff check with the child care policy anytime a registration fee is, I want to say the threshold is $150. But typically, I don't know that we've had any situations where we've denied a registration fee. There is a little bit of a difference between a registration fee and like a fee that's being paid for childcare in advance or something like to hold a spot for a child. We can't necessarily pay those, but if it is like either a one-time or sometimes providers do have annual registration fees, then we can cover those on that reoccurring basis as well.
Thank you, Jen. There were a couple questions around fee structures. So if they charge all their clients a flat fee of a day rate, what do they put in the hour box on the billing forms?
Oh, I see. So this question is really regarding the billing forms only have a spot to mark that you charge hourly or you charge monthly. But with the way that DHS pays, it's really based off of the number of hours of care that you've provided and the provider type that you are. It would definitely make a difference if you're a licensed provider or what we call an enhanced rate provider. So enhanced rate providers are some of our licensed exempt providers who have taken some additional trainings, and so they receive a little bit higher rate of pay. But those providers can qualify for a part-time monthly rate. So it really depends on which of those rates most closely matches your fee structure. But we can definitely, I believe that would be something where we'd want to have you get in contact with our direct pay unit to get a little bit further advice on that. We do also have Joe Litke. He is our provider specialist. So this is one of the things that he specializes in, is helping providers with billing and payment questions.
Thank you. Allison, did you have anything from Facebook?
Thanks, Ronnie. We do have some questions. The first one, Jen, I've seen this on Facebook and the Q&A, folks asking specifically about quarantining, saying that some children are having to stay home for 24 to 30 days. How does that work with receiving payments?
We would consider those as days that a child had been scheduled to be in care previously. So if you had an agreement with the parent that the child was going to come, and then all of a sudden the parent calls you and says, I need to keep them home for 3 weeks. That wasn't an expected change. That would be considered absent days because the child is still considered to be in your care. They're planning on returning. It's COVID-related absence. And so we would go ahead and cover that under our absent day policy.
Thank you. So Jen, if a provider is receiving ERDC, could they also receive a stabilization grant?
Yes, I believe there aren't any restrictions between the stabilization grant and receiving subsidy. That may be a question that would be better suited for Dawn to answer, but she can correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
No, Jen, you're correct. The ERDC is not considered public funding. It's not, double dipping, so to speak. So you are eligible if you receive ERDC.
And Jen, there was also a question around, is it possible to email the billing forms, or do they have to continue mailing them?
No, actually, the second email address on this slide that's up right here, the dpu.childcarebilling@dhsoha.state.or.us, that is where you would want to email your billing forms to. And I do believe they would need to be in a particular format, and I'm going to have to bounce this one over to Joe to answer the formats that are acceptable for receiving billing forms. I believe it's PDF, and I can't recall the others.
Yeah, at this point, just because of our system, we are only able to accept documents in a PDF file document or type. And so you would need to scan that and send that to that email address. I will let you know that it doesn't speed up the processing time frame, but the nice thing about it is you get an email coming back to you stating that we received it, so you know that it was received, and then you can just wait your 3 to 4 business days for it to get processed.
Okay. And you got a thank you for the new changes.
Oh, good.
Ronnie, I have a couple more questions on Facebook if you're still scrolling through.
That's great. Thank you, Allison.
Sure. So one is a comment, and Jen, I don't know how much you can speak to this, but it says raising how much the state pays would be helpful. Quality care costs more than the state pays. Can you speak to how the rates are established and how long those rates last?
I can speak a little bit to that. So with the rates for the employment-related daycare program, the federal requirements say that we need to do a market price study and set our rates based on that market price study. The other option that states have is if we get an approved alternate methodology, which that's all the federal speak. But that would be something like if we were paying based on quality care or paying for the true cost of care rather than what providers are charging. We can do that, but it definitely needs to be approved by the federal government before we can put that new payment structure in place. So for right now, our rates are based off of a market rate survey. And they are many rates. So for licensed family providers and also licensed exempt family providers, we open up the articles in the bargaining agreements every 2 years. So even though we have 4-year agreements, every 2 years we do open up those articles and go through a collective bargaining process where we discuss rates. And so I hope that was helpful. And I can definitely answer more questions if there are more questions about that.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Jen, for all the information and answering those questions. To Allison, who's been watching the Facebook comments, and to Ronnie, who has been supporting us with the Q&A feature here on Zoom. I will go ahead and I think we can kind of start wrapping up now. We understand that we did not get to every single question. There is several questions that have come through. Some of them are very specific. And on some of these cases, we do recommend that you please reach out to the ECC grant email address, which we have included here in the chat, and you can find also on our website. I will go ahead and I'd like to just kind of hand the mic over to our director, Alyssa Chatterjee, for a few minutes, see if there's any updates that you'd like to share, Alyssa, for us as we wrap up. You can see on the screen here for everyone else that we do have our next 2 sessions coming up on December 1st and December 2nd. Those will be the last sessions for this year. And we also encourage you to sign up for the childcare updates via our website. We have the link here. These slides will be made available on our website. If you want to refer back to them later, they'll be available in English, Spanish, and Russian so far. And Alyssa, is there anything that you'd like to add? Any last minute updates you'd like to share with us all?
Thanks, Karina. Just appreciate everybody for taking the time this evening and for all the questions in the chat. We have captured those and we'll try to find additional ways to update the FAQs that Don mentioned related to the childcare stabilization grants. I just wanted to share, we talked about this if you were at our last session in September, but we are in the process of creating a new Department of Early Learning and Care. And since our last session with you all, we have released a progress report that's on our website at OregonEarlyLearning.com/HB3073. That's the number of the legislation that creates this new department. That page will be used to share any additional updates, reports as we get closer to January 1st, 2023, when our new department will be launching. But please let us know if there's any other topics. I know you'll all be getting a survey that Allison, you can share a little bit more about, but we really want to make sure that we're bringing content back to you that you want, you're curious about and that you want more information about. And we're excited to look at what we can bring you in 2022 as well. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. And you did reference the survey. So for those who are in the Zoom, you should be, once we conclude here, be directed to a survey. And for those who are observing and following on Facebook, we will go ahead and drop that link there. And this survey will be helpful for us to determine what other information or topics to bring forth for you. We really want to hear from you and be responsive to all of your needs. So again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for our ODHS partners who joined us today to share information and answer questions. Don for follow-ups on grants, and Miriam for just always keeping us up to date with COVID. So with that, we'll go ahead and see you in December.